Welcome to the Honeypot Project. We're here today to talk about our final build video. We'd like to talk about what we've done over the last 30 days, including our WordPot honeypot. We'll talk about a few recent incidents that we've had on our existing honeypots. Then we would like to do a quick project review and demonstration, and then we will move into our lessons learned section about what lessons that we've learned from the project itself. Okay, we're going to start by talking about WordPress. Now, what WordPress is an online open source web creation tool written in PHP. It's probably the easiest and most powerful blogging and website content management system in existence today. WordPress is also the most popular content management system in existence today. That alone makes it a target for attack. So when the first step in an attack usually is that an attacker will try to do research on the site that he's looking to attack. One of the first things that they'll do is try to pull up your public web page, and more often than not is served up by WordPress. So what they will try to do is log in through administrative consoles for your WordPress to gain access to that system, and then to exploit that to find passwords, usernames, etc. that can be used to attack your system. So this is the public face of your business. It's also the public face for an attacker. We've created a honeypot called WordPot. WordPot basically looks like a vanilla WordPress deployment. It contains weak authentication credentials, which means a weak password that they can use to log into the administrative console. And what they would probably do is look for usernames, passwords. They may attempt to install applications in WordPress. So we thought that was important to come up with this WordPot honeypot that we've deployed, and that's our first stop. Okay, well, this is the demonstration of our WordPot honeypot here. This is a functional website. It is a Flask application programmed in Python. It is running the default theme for WordPress. As you can see here, it is fully functional. It just looks like somebody has done a very poorly job setting this up. And what will happen is we can go to the login, and then we can try to log in. And what it's going to do is it's going to reject us and record our login attempts. So that is how it's currently configured. It is fully functional WordPress, and right now it's running the default theme. So that's proven to be quite useful. We've gotten quite a few probes from that. And like I said, this is the public face of your honeypot. So I would highly recommend, like if you're going to do a honeypot, to start off with WordPot. That way you can set the attacker up that they believe that is a real site. Talk very quickly about our shockpot honeypot sensor that we have deployed. What that does is that is a web app. It's designed to find attackers doing a very specific bash remote code vulnerability. It's CVE-2014-6271. We've had some success finding people trying to exploit this from various places around the world. And as you can see here, this is our Splunk again. Once again, we're using Splunk for our analysis. Splunk is definitely still up and operational. And what that tells us is where the attacks are coming from and how frequently. But that's one of the several honeypot sensors that we now have running. We also now have a honeypot sensor called P0F, and that monitors several ports for any sort of activity that's ongoing. The main advantage of P0F is that it finds out the operating system of the attacker. So the majority of attacks are coming from Linux machines, 3.1 or higher kernels. You even have attacks that come from Windows 7 or Windows 8. That's very interesting to know, but people do use that. P0F will tell you also where the attacks are coming from, on what ports that they're trying. 22, 220, or 2222. Those are the most common. Those are the most common for SSH, and also port 80 is quite common. So as you can see, we have quite a lot of analytics that's been done on P0F. That's really kind of filled out our arrangement of honeypot sensors. We also have a elastic honey sensor. What elastic honey does is it is a honeypot for Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch, as you might know, works on port 5000. There are some known vulnerabilities that have been in Elasticsearch, but we have not had too much activity on there. We still continue to use Splunk. Splunk is wonderful. I can't say enough nice things about this. It's a security event monitoring. As you can see, we are still getting plenty of attacks from all over the world. And this is really important. I can't stress enough that what Splunk has really done to this project is you have quite a few points of data that you're going to get from these honeypots. These honeypot sensors are going to run. They're going to collect log files. And all that's very fun. It's very exciting to have somebody log in. But really, you need to look at the long-term trends for this to have any sort of business, application. You're not going to have somebody, especially in management, who's going to be interested to look through some syslog file to see, what username and passwords are being used. It's very, very important that you take the information that you have in a honeypot, whatever that might be, whatever information that you are gathering, and it's very important to be able to make that searchable, to do analysis on that, and to make it visualized. Because if you can't do a visualized presentation, or make the events searchable so you can do analysis on them and come up with some type of trends, for example, it's going to be completely worthless. Flat out is worthless without Splunk. So once again, I wanted to demonstrate Splunk and really talk about why it's important, why I've learned it's important, and I would say, as far as lessons learned go for the project itself, and I'll reiterate this in my conclusion, it is very important to take the data that you're collecting from sensors, even network devices such as routers with NetFlow enabled, for example. It's very important to collect, aggregate, and then make the logs searchable, make them so that you can analyze these logs, and make the logs so that you can visualize the logs. Otherwise, you basically have a bunch of text files, and unless you're some sort of regex genius, that's not going to do you much good. I am going to talk really quickly about our fun TeamSpeak player, and I wanted to touch very generally on botnets again, because the majority of the traffic is coming from botnets. There's no doubt about it. Um, the vast majority of traffic is botnets, and botnets are seem to be everywhere, and they've infected numerous hosts um, all over the world. So we'll have a quick talk about that in our. So we're going to talk about what's been our biggest adversary during the entire honeypot project, which has definitely been botnets. So really, what are these botnets doing? What are they trying to accomplish? And how does an attacker cover himself so that he's not being detected? So I got a graphic up. This is a very nice graphic. This is from Malware Must Die. If you haven't checked the site out, please do. The guy is very good at reverse engineering botnets and malware in general. He's appeared in many security magazines and publications. So this is what they call the strudels attack. And that's a general term for what we have going on here. The IoTs that are infected are the strudels. Um, so an attacker will typically rent infrastructure, VPSs, etc. And what he will do is he will securely connect to these rented infrastructure. Now it depends, however, whatever method he wants to use. If he wants to go through the darknet, etc., that's all fine. But the first infrastructure is always rented, so it can't be technically traced back to him. He's then going to push into attempt to hack into an SSH server, and then the server will be the next base of operations, which we will push into IoT devices or other servers. And then what he's going to use are these endpoint devices, and he's going to attempt to steal credentials, whether the usernames, passwords. Typically, they're going to try to target web servers, email servers, etc. And then these are going to filter back up the chain through the strudels, through the rented infrastructure back to the attacker. Now, then the attacker typically would choose to use other rented infrastructure, definitely not the same, and he's going to go back down the chain on the other side. He's going to grab another hacked server under his control, find more IoT devices which are vulnerable, and then he's going to use these stolen credentials to hack into another database. So what are we seeing with all these botnets that are trying to attack our server? That's more or less their point, is they are trying to probably hack us through SSH. From there they would go and attack other IoT devices if they could find them, or other servers, or they're going to try to launch an attack against the actual web server or email server, typically, or DNS or whatever, and they're going to try to find credentials. And that's basically how the chain goes. This is done to protect the attacker. Like I said, the attacker is typically hiding behind fast flux DNS. Or other techniques that's going to hide where he is. Sometimes they hide their rented infrastructure. Sometimes they use other methods. To abuse, such as Tor. That's another common thing that they'll use. They might use a combination of fast flux DNS. They'll use Tor, etc., etc., and then they will like I said, their ultimate goal is to exfiltrate data. Usually financial data is best, but customer data will work too. So that's kind of how that fits into the whole. That gives you the whole picture of what we're really dealing with and what um, the larger issue is here that we've been dealing with. And we were hit with tens of thousands of attacks. Um, Many of them originated from the same server, but there was a plethora of different addresses, too numerous to even mention, that are infected with botnets, and these botnets are attempting to do all sorts of nasty things, and it's mostly for the financial benefit of the attacker. The other thing that we noticed quite frequently is that there's a large uptick in Bitcoin related and cryptocurrency related attacks. We even dealt with, I'm not sure if you remember, but a video or two ago where we had an attacker who was quite skilled. He got into our server, and instead of setting up some type of strudels attack, he tried to do distributed cryptocurrency mining, and that seems to be very, very popular. And some of our POF and other sensors have detected more and more and more traffic on cryptocurrency related to cryptocurrency mining or cryptocurrency services. My only guess is that this has become more and more profitable. I guess if you're mining cryptocurrencies with other people's resources for free, that it might be profitable. I recently read that there was a hacker in China who was making over $20,000 a day hacking cryptocurrency. So like I said, we detected the traffic also. So my guess is that it is profitable for attackers. Um, but I wanted to show this graphic and point out this guy's work because he really opened my eyes as to what exactly is going on and what the final goal is. So we're just kind of a stopping point. But if we were a poorly configured AWS light sail instance that's out there for some company, which a lot of times they'll run all sorts of applications in the cloud. People think the cloud is very secure, when in reality it's your responsibility, not Amazon's, not any of the other services that provide cloud functions and cloud instances that you can use. They're nice, but it's your responsibility to protect your devices in the cloud, and make sure that you're following best practices. Um, Finally, I would have to say on that matter that also weak credentials. Um, that is probably more often than not what these botnets are trying to exploit is weak credentials. They will also try to exploit vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities typically. So servers that aren't patched, those are great security risks. We recently even witnessed that with Equifax, $272 million breach already. It's going to go sky high. It might even go into the billions. When it's all said and done with litigation, that was a good example of poor patch management. But that's what was important with the Shockpot honeypot and the P0F honeypot. They were showing us, what kind of exploits that the people are just throwing out there. And most of the time they're looking for known vulnerabilities. Or the other very famous one is weak credentials. If you have a poor password, username and password, that's a no-go. If you can have two-factor authentication, that's the best you can. That's much better. But you might want to. There's several things that you can do, including cryptography, and you can use certificates and such that you need to log in through SSH that you might want to invest in. but this was part of our discussion, and I haven't talked about this part yet, and I wanted to really show you this graphic so we can see kind of what's going on, big picture. Gonna just touch on what the project was about again. I'm going to use my project PowerPoint here. The purpose of the project is to detect cyber attacks and insider threats with an aim to generate actionable threat intelligence for small business. The widespread use of encryption, increasingly sophisticated evasion techniques, and high false positive rates have reduced the effectiveness of network intrusion detection systems. The project centers around the use of honeypot sensors to detect ongoing attacks, while providing useful threat information and insight into the methodology of threat agents. The result of the project demonstrating the importance of transforming raw data into intelligence through analysis and visualization. I think that's a good abstract for the project. We've succeeded. We began the project, actually I began the project back in December before break started. I began to work on honeypots. By January, we had our first honeypot working. We've since improved on that, improved the sensors. We've even used high honeypot sensors which we've discussed in the last video. Their usefulness for small businesses is kind of questionable, though. They are kind of one-time use, and I'm not quite sure that a small business would use those. But what you can do with a high interaction honeypot sensor would be to set up your network intrusion detection system to send what it believes to be malicious traffic to the high interaction honeypot sensor. You can even filter that to filter botnets out, and hopefully just filter traffic that would be from a legitimate attacker through your NIDs to your high interactions sensor. The really important lesson that I think I took out of this and reiterate one more time is that threat data is not threat intelligence. Like, data needs to be collected, it needs to be aggregated, it needs to be indexed to allow for analysis and visualization necessary to become intelligence. You can't do anything unless you're able to aggregate logs. The more sensors, the more information you have that you're able to collect and aggregate centrally will give you a much better picture of the threat environment, what's going on, than you would if you were just looking at these sensors. So I do believe that this would be cost effective for small business. I work for probably what you would consider a medium-sized business, which is we deal with Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Ontario. But we're still probably between 15, maybe 1,000 to 1,500 employees. I think that this would work well in an environment like my work, especially the low interaction honeypot sensors. Those require very minimal monitoring and interaction. They require minimal maintenance, and they are very, very cost effective. They could be run on they could be run with very few resources and money put into a project like that. The information that you could get could be life-saving. There's a nice statistic that I read that 6 out of 10 businesses go out of business within 6 months of a data breach. You couple that with another statistic that 50% of the attacks that are cyber attacks are against small businesses, and you kind of see the larger picture that you might have a small business. For now, you might be avoiding attacks, but if you do get attacked and you do have critical information or personally identifiable information for customers, and you are attacked and that does get in a breach, you're probably looking at bankruptcy. Some of the things that we use Splunk. We used Sysdig and Falco. We used the modern honeypot network server. We did try to use an elk stack with our Sysdig and Falco. We found that Splunk is a little bit better at that. We used IPsec to create a VPN tunnel for our high interaction sensors. We created WordPot. WordPod is basically using a Flask application that creates, mimics WordPress. We did ShockPot. We did P0F sensors. We did DNA sensors in the first honeypot, where we discovered a lot of Bitcoin traffic. So we've run multiple sensors. We've invested time and energy into getting Splunk and Elk Stack functional. Really, the last 30 days, though, we're getting the WordPot to work, getting actionable information out of that. And that really, I think, drove some of the final attacks that we had against our, through SSH, against our servers. We had somebody log in and try to install TeamSpeak, which was kind of amusing. But we also had more attackers who were trying to download what it looked like is crypto mining software. We had one notable guy from Russia that was using some type of DNS technology to quickly rotate IP addresses. So when you tried to point back to this address that he was using, it would quickly scroll through IP addresses, so you couldn't really figure out which one he was using. It is actually interesting free service that you can sign up for in Russia if you can speak по-русски. It kind of helps. So I read through that, and I wanted to sign up for that, but I didn't bother. My Russian's not quite that good. Anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to pursue this topic. I have learned considerable amounts about network security in general. I was even able to pass my security certification, the SSCP, during the semester. I think a large part in due to what I've learned from this project. I've learned how botnets, and I've really once again learned the value of log analysis and visualization. I couldn't stress that enough. I think it's the number one thing that I've probably learned out of this. But we've had a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed the project. I've enjoyed the project very much too. If you have any further questions, email me. Thank you for your time, and take care.